The global landscape is shifting by the hour. We're seeing signs of surrender, preemptive strikes, and even bold strategic moves. A new world is emerging from the heart of conflict, where democratic values are clashing head-on with authoritarian regimes. Here's today's major headline: a shocking announcement from the Middle East. Iran has officially agreed to President Donald Trump's demand not to produce nuclear weapons. This is seen as a major diplomatic win for the US administration, and a clear setback for Tehran's regime after facing intense, unprecedented pressure. Now for the detailed story, ladies and gentlemen. Iran says it's ready to sign a nuclear deal with President Trump in exchange for lifting economic sanctions. The announcement came from Ali Samkhani, a top advisor to Iran's supreme leader, during an interview with NBC News. He stated that Iran is committed to never producing nuclear weapons. That means getting rid of highly enriched uranium stocks that could be used to make bombs, agreeing to enrich uranium only to low levels for civilian use, and allowing international inspectors full access to oversee the process. However, he added that Iran would only take these steps if all economic sanctions are lifted immediately. When asked if Iran would agree to the deal today under those conditions, Samkhani responded with a clear yes. He also said that if the US takes this approach, it could definitely lead to better relations and improve the situation in the near future. This interview happened just hours after the US offered Iran an olive branch, along with a warning of tougher sanctions if no deal is reached. Still, the Iranian official expressed frustration with Trump's tone and ongoing threats, saying, "They talk about an olive branch, but all we've seen is barbed wire." Mass evacuations in Gaza. Israel sets sights on Hamas. Israel is pushing forward with more evacuation orders in Gaza, some of the largest yet. Many areas in Gaza City have now been declared unsafe, especially those hit by bombings, according to the BBC. Residents who had sought shelter there are now being told to leave for their own safety due to heavy Israeli military strikes. Among the buildings being targeted are the Islamic University, a hospital, and 3 former schools. Israel claims Hamas is using these sites as command centers, but local authorities and aid organizations say thousands of civilians are sheltering in those buildings. Evacuating these people will take time, and according to officials, could lead to more casualties. The BBC reports that all of this signals Israel might significantly escalate its military campaign in Gaza. Finally, a UN-backed report has warned that Gaza is now at risk of famine due to the prolonged blockade and is suffering from severe food insecurity. World Health Organization, without enough nutritious food, clean water, and access to healthcare, a whole generation in Gaza will be permanently affected. There's still a slim chance that Israel and Hamas might accept the US proposed ceasefire deal, but so far Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hasn't changed his stance. Netanyahu said Israel will expand its military attack on Gaza and nothing will stop it. He stressed that the Israeli army will destroy Hamas in Gaza very soon. On the 13th of this month, Netanyahu announced that the army will use its full force in the coming days to enter Gaza and finish the operation. This means getting rid of Hamas and freeing all the hostages. Netanyahu's government plans to keep negotiating to save the remaining hostages. He didn't rule out a temporary ceasefire if hostages are released, but the military operation won't stop. On the other hand, Hamas refuses to free the remaining hostages unless Israel agrees to a permanent ceasefire and withdraws from Gaza. Another senior commander in Iran's Revolutionary Guard was killed after the Israeli landing in Shuja'iyah. Sources estimate that an airstrike carried out by Israeli forces on Tuesday evening, targeting Hamas leader Mohammed Momas, may have killed Hamas faction leader Rafat Mohammed Sabana. There's cautious concern about whether Hamas officials were killed, but confirmation will take some time. If confirmed, the current Hamas leader is one of the few senior commanders left alive who could replace those taken out in quick Israeli military moves. Since the war began, the Israeli army has killed several senior Hamas commanders: Chief Engineer Yahya Sinwar, Military Commander Mohammed Diaf, and brigade leaders Man Aita al-Batza Brigade, Emad Randor Central Gaza Brigade, and Rafat Salami Khan Yunis Brigade. Israel also killed Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh and his deputy Salah Anouri. That leaves Arin Haddad as the only original Gaza City brigade leader alive from before the war. Defense sources say he's likely to become Hamas's next military chief. Sabana has led the Rafah brigade since the 2014 Gaza conflict, when his predecessor was killed by the Israeli Defense Forces. In February 2024, reports suggested the IDF had nearly killed him, with previous assassination attempts failing. In recent Israeli military strikes in Rafah, the army managed to wipe out most of Hamas's remaining fighters there, out of about 4,000. But Sabana seems to have escaped. Recently, after 19 months, Israeli forces discovered and destroyed one of the last strategic tunnels connecting Rafah and Khan Yunis. This seriously limits commanders like Sabana from moving around to keep Hamas's leadership structure intact and coordinate operations. Because of this, Sabana and Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar had to leave their usual hideouts and move to a spot under a public hospital in Gaza, where they're easier to detect. Some reports also say Hamas spokesperson Abu al-Buraidah might have been killed in the same airstrike. Only Adnan Anad, the Gaza City militia leader, remains alive from Hamas's 5 original militia commanders before the war. Putin's playing cat and mouse. The United States is ready to boost aid to help Ukraine turn the tide against Russia. If Russia doesn't want peace, the United States must increase support for Ukraine. Talks scheduled for Thursday in Turkey between Moscow and Kiev will be the latest test of how serious Vladimir Putin is about a ceasefire. If Putin wants to sabotage the deal, President Donald Trump will face his own challenge. Trump expressed optimism that the talks will bring some good news, but Moscow has always pretended to want peace only to reveal its true intentions. Remember, Putin, a former KGB agent, started this war and broke ceasefire agreements. As long as he thinks he can gain an advantage, he'll keep attacking, no matter what's agreed. It's good that Trump threatened secondary sanctions on Moscow if no deal is reached. Russia's economy is already fragile and would suffer serious damage. To force Putin to accept a real peace deal, Trump and the West will likely have to increase support to North Korea, especially military aid and weapons that could make a difference on the ground. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Russia has suffered heavy and growing military losses for every square mile gained, yet they're ready to send more troops. Ukraine desperately needs to increase its spending on the battlefield if it wants to deter or even reverse Russia's recent advances. The good news is Trump seems to realize that Putin, not Ukrainian President Zelensky, is the main obstacle to peace. If Trump really wants to end the war soon, he'll have to tighten all restrictions on Putin as much as possible. Envoy reveals NATO troop deployment plans in Ukraine. U.S. Envoy Kay Coote said Washington is discussing with NATO European allies the deployment of military forces to Ukraine as part of post-conflict agreements. Speaking on the Fuse News channel on March 13th, President Trump's envoy John Kay said, "Troops from France, Germany, the UK and Poland are likely to join the force deployed in Ukraine called E3 under the Conflict Prevention Agreement." He explained the force was initially called E3, but is now E4, including the UK, France, Germany and Poland. Soldiers will be deployed on the western side of the Dnipro River, outside direct contact zones. He added that there will also be a peacekeeping force in the east involving a third party to monitor the ceasefire. The plan is well prepared and comes as talks between Russia and Ukraine are expected in Istanbul. Coote and another senior envoy, Steve Kov, were set to attend a meeting on March 11th. Russian President Vladimir Putin suggested resuming direct talks with Ukraine in Turkey on March 15th. Georgian President Vladimir Zelensky said he's ready to meet Putin on Thursday, but insisted talks will only start after a 30-day ceasefire is agreed. On January 12th, foreign ministers from France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, the UK and the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs issued a joint statement after a London meeting. They promised strong security guarantees for Ukraine, including forming a coalition of land, air and naval security forces to build trust in future peace talks and support rebuilding Ukraine's armed forces. Russia opposes any NATO troops in Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said it would be a direct threat to Russia. Meanwhile, Russian Security Council Secretary Sitya Swigo warned such a move could lead to a third kind of nuclear weapons, even those linked to the nuclear sphere. Thanks so much for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for S News. We are committed to bringing you honest and fair news.